On this week's podcast, we have a special guest who's going to talk about her experience in the aviation industry and what you need to do from an English perspective to get your career as a flight attendant to take off. Welcome to
Aprender Inglés con Estefania and Craig.
Hello, and if you're new to the podcast, you're very, very welcome. And if you've come back to listen again, thank you very much. Now, my regular co-host Reza is not with us this week, but I'm lucky, very lucky, to be joined by Estefania from auxiliardelenguas.com, who's a language teacher who helps cabin crew members and pilots to grow their English skills and work in the aviation industry. Estefania, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
You're welcome. Now, I usually start by asking people where their accent is from so that the listeners can place the accent of guests that come on the podcast. But your name suggests you have a Spanish background. Is that right?
I am Spanish, but my accent isn't Spanish. I've been living up and down the UK, so I would say that I have a British accent, but I can't really tell you from where it is. I can't really pinpoint where it's from.
You moved up and down and around the UK. Where are you based at the moment? Where are you speaking from?
I live near Brighton in the south of England.
Oh, lovely. A nice part of the country. Very sunny on the coast.
Yeah, sometimes.
Sometimes
Not
sunny.
Not as sunny as Spain.
No, not as sunny as Spain. So what do you do exactly for a living, Estefania, and what attracted you to the aviation industry?
So I trained to become a teacher, and a few years into the profession, I decided that I didn't really want to do that. So I moved to the aviation industry, basically. What attracted me to do this job is that no 2 days are the same. And also the fact that you get to travel the world and meet different people every day is the job that I really like. Yeah, it's quite different to teaching as well, but I do some teaching on the side. So I'm kind of combining both things.
Well, we'll talk about the teaching part a bit later. So most of your week, I would say, is involved in flying around and doing your job on planes and working for an airline. Tell us what you like about your job and also what are some of the negative aspects, some of the drawbacks and challenges.
So what I like about my job is that you get the opportunity to work with different people every day. And that's something that I treasure a lot because it's a really unique thing to the job. And also, I really like the fact that, as I said before, I think that I feel that I'm repeating myself. Not 2 days are the same. So one day you can have a pretty smooth an easy day, and another day you could have a longer day, which is fine by me. It just shows the nature of this job, which is very different in perspective. So that's the good aspects of this job. Also, you get perks for traveling.
Sorry, what's a perk? If in case the audience doesn't know, a perk of a job.
So a perk is like an advantage.
Right, a benefit. Yeah. An advantage. Yeah. What sort of perks do you get?
I get traveling discounts. So when I want to get to another country, then I obviously get a discount, or I can travel for really little money in my airline. So I can do that. Yeah.
So while you're flying around, are you flying mainly in Europe at the moment with your airline, or are you going to really exotic places like Rio de Janeiro and Acapulco? Where are you flying to?
It's interesting because as we're recording this, we're in the middle of the winter season. I'm mainly doing long haul, which means that I'm traveling to exotic places and distant places. Yeah.
Fantastic. That sounds lovely. As someone like me who likes to travel, loves to travel, that sounds like a fantastic job. So someone listening, Estefania, who's thinking of maybe working for an airline and doing the job you do, what qualifications would they need? Where should they start? And how does the selection process work to do your job?
So, in order to become a flight attendant, you need to have finished your secondary school studies and you need to be able to swim. And also, it's an advantage if you speak another language, but if you speak English, that's what you need. Yeah. So, not many qualifications. Obviously, your health conditions need to be excellent. I think that's pretty much it, Craig.
It didn't occur to me that you need to be able to swim. Of course, if you're flying over the sea, you need to be able to swim. That goes without saying. But as far as
Hopefully you won't need it.
yeah, hopefully you won't need it. Yeah. And it always makes me laugh when I take a flight somewhere that's not going over any water and they still demonstrate how to blow up the life belt around your neck, but we're not flying over any water. That amazes me. Anyway, getting back to the English qualifications. So do they do a test? Do you need to apply with a Cambridge qualification or any IELTS level? How does that work?
You don't need any standard certification, so no IELTS or no Cambridge examinations, but you do need to show a good command of English. So the airlines sometimes ask you to do a test, an English test, and some others just ask you to go through the process in English so they can they can hear and understand your English. That's how it mainly works. But no, you don't need any kind of certificate to work in aviation unless you're a pilot or an air traffic controller, which is a bit different. In that case, you do need qualifications, but they're not the standard, unusual qualifications that you would get for a normal job. They're specific to those roles.
Yes, I had a student a while ago who was an air traffic controller studying for the qualification, and the test was very different to the Cambridge test. So obviously that varies, I would guess, from airline to airline. And it sounds like the test they do for your English would be in the interview. So they might just ask you some questions verbally. It's not a written test. They just want to see if you've got the basics. Is that right?
Correct.
Please fasten your seatbelts and put your seat in an upright position because I want to tell you about my conversation courses that are taking off very, very soon. If you want to improve your speaking fluency, your communication skills, and your confidence when you speak English, you should join me and a group of lovely students on Zoom and take your English conversation to the next level. But don't take my word for it. This is why Jose, who has just finished his third conversation course with me, this is why Jose does the course.
I want to speak and I want that they can understand me. So that's my goal, to keep speaking, to keep sharing my thoughts with my classmates. Of course, yes, it lasts 1 hour and 30 minutes, but sometimes we are running out of time really quickly. It's so enjoyable, the course, and times flies. It's really incredible.
So, if you are like Jose and you want to speak English with a small, safe and enjoyable group of people, send me an email and I'll give you more information about the next course. Emails go to me, Craig, that's CRAIG, at inglespodcast.com. And now, back to Estefania. One thing that occurs to me, Estefania, is what happened during COVID, because obviously a lot of the planes were grounded. They were on the ground during COVID. They weren't flying. How did you manage during that period?
I remember I was traveling in Thailand back at the time. We received a message from the airline saying that we're going to cease operations for the time being. So we had to fly back, and then the airline came to a standstill, really. Most airlines started doing cargo operations, so they started distributing goods and items around the world, but obviously they didn't need flight attendants because there weren't any passengers to look after. So we were just grounded, as most of the planes were, but I took the opportunity to do some things for not just for my future, but to keep me busy, as many other people did. And that's how my project Auxiliar de Lengua started, because I had the time now to work on something that I really wanted to do for a long time being, because when I started working in aviation, I started missing education as well. So yeah, that's a bit of the background of how it all started.
I'm wondering if did the airline keep paying you while you were grounded, or did they stop paying? It was a
Yes,
long time that you were
we
grounded.
were furloughed, which means that they kept paying us, but we weren't working, which was the case with many other people in the UK as well. So yeah.
Yeah, that was a scary time, but you made the most of it and you launched your side project, and I'm really pleased that it's going well for you. Now, COVID obviously in the past for many people, for most people. Let's look to the future. What do you think the future of aviation looks like going forward, and what innovations or developments are you most excited about? Do you see electric planes in the future? Do you think anything's going to change drastically as far as flight's concerned?
Well, hopefully we'll get alternatives to carbon fossil fuel and go for more environmentally friendly fuel. And also, they're talking about maybe removing one of the pilots. This is what the CEO of, I think it was Qatar Airways, so Emirates, was saying the other day. Maybe removing one of the pilots, but I don't know if that's a smart move. I don't know.
So you're saying that there'd be one less pilot in the cockpit. The cockpit is the room at the front of the plane. And at the moment, I think there are two. Is that right? There's a pilot and a co-pilot. So are you saying that there'll only be one and a computer?
This is what the CEO of Emirates, I can't remember if it was Emirates or Qatar Airways, but they might want to remove one pilot in the future, but I can't tell you dates or anything. It's just speculation, I think, at the moment.
This is what I think. Tell me if I'm right, Stefania. I think that planes can fly autonomously 100%. In other words, the computer can land the plane, take off, and also fly according to a flight plan. Although sometimes maybe the pilots deactivate that and they take off and land manually. So they're actually flying the plane. And sometimes they don't. Can you speak about that? Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought so. So we're actually where we're kind of worried about cars, self-driving cars on the roads, maybe being a bit dangerous. Most of the planes actually fly themselves anyway.
Exactly. So the way it works is that the pilots just supervise what the computer's doing. And obviously, if there's a moment when they need to take control, they do it. I'm not an expert into what happens in the flight deck because I work at the other side. I work in the cabin, but that's my understanding of it as well.
So maybe we can see a day as with cars where there won't be any pilots. We'll just get on the plane and the plane will fly itself. Wouldn't that be wonderful?
Maybe you won't get any flight attendants either. It would just be done by robots.
Oh no, don't say that. I think it would be much happier if someone like you were in the cabin speaking to us. Have you had any interesting stories while you were flying with passengers? Any memorable moments that you want to share?
I don't know if you know about this, but you have the opportunity to go into the flight deck, which also some people call the cockpit. I like to call it the flight deck. You can actually go and see what it is like for the pilots and so on. You need to be on the ground. It's not allowed to be when you're airborne.
You can't do it airborne, surely, because of security risks.
No, you can't. Exactly. Okay. After 9/11, all of that changed. Apparently, you were able in the past, but obviously, time's gone and yeah, it's quite different now.
I can
So,
remember, sorry to interrupt you, I can remember doing that when I was a kid. Obviously that was a very long time ago, but I can remember going into the flight deck
do
and the
you?
pilot showing me the controls. Yeah, I think I was
Oh,
probably 8 or 9 years old. It was wonderful, but not anymore, unfortunately.
well, you can do it on the ground. It's not the same thing, but still, you can do it and you can have a look and see what's in there and so on. So, yeah, that's something that you can ask your flight attendants if you fancy, if you want to have a look, yeah, and they will be pleased to let you in if everything's good.
That's a lovely idea, especially if you have kids. What advice would you give to anyone thinking of maybe starting a career in the aviation industry, whether that were to be a flight attendant or a pilot or an air traffic controller? Any final advice?
I would say go for it because it's an amazing experience. And the piece of advice that I would give to them is to really learn English if they don't speak English as their native language, because it's really important when it comes to communication. At the end of the day, communication is one of the bases of aviation. So you need to have a good command, a strong command of English to be able to work in this industry. So I would say that mainly work on that. And also to be a people's person, you're going to be surrounded by loads of people. You're going to work with even thousands of people every day. So you've got to like people. Yeah, I would say that. And good sense of humor sometimes as well, because it's hard to be in a metallic tube for 8+ hours on your day. So yeah, I would say those are three things that I would recommend everyone to have if you want to work in the aviation industry.
Very good advice. And I can imagine that sometimes your patience is tested by some passengers who may not
It
be as
is.
polite as they should be. Do you have courses that teach you how to behave correctly with customer care in situations where the customers are really rude and impolite?
So we're taught how to restrain people, but I have to say that I've never had to do it. But yeah, we carry some handcuffs on the plane. Not on
Handcuffs?
all of, yes,
Really?
not on all planes, but we do carry them just in case. And also some straps to restrain passengers.
To tie them to the seat if they misbehave.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, let's hope you never have to use them, Estefania. Let's hope you never
No.
have that situation. Okay, it's been lovely talking to you. Let's finish by looking at one or two idioms connected to flying that you kindly sent to me. And I think they're quite interesting because we could connect them to flying. To take off, for example, we mentioned that at the beginning. The flights take off, the planes take off and they land. That's the phrasal verb. But there's another meaning to take off, isn't there?
Yeah, so when you start a project takes off, for example.
And would you say that your teaching business has taken off, or is it still in the initial stages? Has it taken off?
I don't know whether it's still taxing or taking off has taken off, but yeah, why not? It's taken off.
Good. I'm really pleased to hear it's taken off. And I hope that it will succeed with flying colours. What does that mean, with flying colours?
With flying colors means with distinction.
With distinction. So you'd pass a test with flying colours, for example.
You get a 10 out of 10 or 100 or 100%. Or maybe a bit less, but yeah.
And when you took the test to become a flight attendant, how did it go? Was it difficult?
I passed most of them with flying colors.
I'm really pleased to hear that. Good. And I must say that as soon as we started this interview, you hit the ground running. To start doing something immediately with a lot of energy and very successfully means that you hit the ground running. For example, when I started my new job, I hit the ground running and tried to learn as much as I could. The sky's the limit. What does that mean?
You have lots of possibilities. Basically, the world's your oyster, to use another idiom.
Anything's possible. Yep, you can do anything if you set your mind to it. That's something my dad used to say. My dad used to say, son, if you work hard and stay focused, the sky is the limit. But he obviously wasn't thinking of English teaching when he said that. On on autopilot is very much connected to aeroplanes, isn't it? We spoke about the pilot before. What does that mean if you're on autopilot?
So you do something automatically.
Yes, without thinking about it. I've done my job for so many years that I can do it on autopilot. Or perhaps I was so tired that I drove home from work on autopilot. I didn't think about it. I just did it. So you do a task on autopilot. You can see all of these idioms and some notes connected to my conversation with Estefania on the website at inglespodcast.com. And our final one is maybe not so positive. It's crash and burn, where someone has failed miserably. You have definitely, Estefania, you have not crashed and burned as a guest on this podcast. It's been a pleasure to talk to you about aviation. Best of luck for the future. And finally, how can people reach out to you if they want to find out more about what you do?
So they can go onto my website, which is auxiliardelenguas.com, or they can also follow me on Instagram at auxiliardelenguas.
And those links will be in the show notes on inglespodcast.com. Thank you again. It's been lovely to talk to you. And hopefully you can come back another time and speak about another aspect of flying with flying colours.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for having me, Craig. It's been a pleasure.
Many thanks to Estefania for coming on the podcast. And thank you for listening. But wait. Don't go anywhere just yet, because it's your turn to practice your English. If you work in the aviation industry, we would love to hear about your experience. How does it compare with Estefania's? And if you don't work in aviation, do you have any suggestions for future podcast topics? We'd love to hear those too. So send your voice messages to speakpipe.com. That's speakpipe.com/Ingles podcast. If you prefer to contact us by email, you can reach me, Craig, at inglespodcast.com, or send your emails to Reza at belfastreza, R-E-Z-A, @gmail.com. This podcast is sponsored in part by mansioningles.com. Why not visit the online store at store.mansioningles.net, and there you can find a range of courses that will help you improve your English. And before we touch down and land this week, we'd like to thank all of you who are helping by supporting this podcast on Patreon. And you too can join our Patreon program for as little as $1.50 per month, and you get instant access to recent transcriptions. To do that, go to patreon.com, patreon.com/Inglespodcast. And next week, Reza will be back for another podcast. Until then, thank you for listening. Have a wonderful week, and thank you so much for spending your time with us. The music in this podcast is by Pitts. The track is called See You Later.